What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they fall back-to-back games to 2-10 teams, set a record, make NFL history in the absolute worst way. And now the panic button, the alarms, they're certainly sounding. We're going to dive into that, the loss, Mike Tomlin, how much of this is on him, and where do the Pittsburgh Steelers go from here? And then, obviously, the quarterback situation, the most alarming piece of the puzzle for the Pittsburgh Steelers, leaving Week 14 against the New England Patriots. Steven, it's a beautiful day in the Burgh. It was set up nicely for a victory Friday. Instead, the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at the absolute worst-case scenario. How you feeling, my friend?
You know, I'm pissed. This could have been a win-win for everyone. You could have knocked the Patriots down a peg, given them a better spot in the draft rankings going into the spring. Steelers needed a win. This could have been perfect for everybody, but no. We just all got to walk away mad now. I don't think anyone won that.
No, definitely not. Where do the Patriots even? Are they even going to get a quarterback? Is this? I know nobody cares, but if we're talking lose, you just want to add fuel to the fire here, throw dirt on the grave. Did the Patriots just get screwed out of Drake May? Is that what just happened?
I hope not. I mean, look, I can't imagine them winning another game down the stretch of the season, but if they do, I mean, they're still like in the third spot or something like that, but they could have been like first or second, I think, if they had lost again.
Can you see the Pittsburgh Steelers winning another game down the stretch here? We'll dive into it. Let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers loss to the New England Patriots, obviously 21-18 right from the jump. I mean, you want to chalk up last week against the Cardinals as their worst loss of the season. This one somehow maybe was worse. Just from start to finish, there was just no juice. Feels like everything started to boil over as the game went on and as things got worse. And then afterwards, obviously, players expressing their frustration and where they stand with this team and how guys maybe just don't have the right mentality as they approach this back half of the season. They are now currently 7-6. Just to lay out a little fun fact that is the complete opposite of fun after this game. The Pittsburgh Steelers, when I said at the beginning they made NFL history, they became the first team ever to lose back-to-back games, to be above 500, lose back-to-back games to teams at least 8 games under 500 in NFL history. They have now dropped out of the playoff race. They currently sit as the 8th seed behind the Indianapolis Colts, the Cleveland Browns, and the Houston Texans. They have 4 of maybe their toughest games ahead of them moving forward. And, last night, if you were there, all you heard was boos. At one point, there was a couple of drunk guys in front of the press box just screaming to fire Tomlin. It was not the greatest night for the Pittsburgh Steelers or for the fan base or really for anybody. Now everybody wants to know the big question, really the only question that matters, is the season over? You sit here, you're coming off of a bad loss. How do you stand? Where do you stand on that question?
Well, I think the worst part of it is that mathematically, the season is far from over. For all the reasons that we've talked about, is that, the AFC is wide open. You're still kind of in the thick of the playoff hunt. But the reality is, like, this doesn't look like a team that can do what it takes to climb back into the picture and be a serious contender in any sense, like for a playoff spot, for a division, for even more than that. It would just take something extraordinary for this team to kind of pull themselves back into a favorable position. And you just don't watch a game like that and think that, this team has what it takes to make their situation any better, to overcome all of the things that have gone wrong this year, to capitalize on the position that they're in, which is like that. Again, this league is wide open, like you're not fighting a bunch of, 12-win teams or anything. Like there are a bunch of teams that are on your level that are dealing with a lot of the same problems, and the Steelers are just unequipped every week to come out and capitalize on those opportunities that everyone else in the league is giving them. So while it doesn't, while you look at the standings and you're a little shocked every week to think, oh, the Steelers are still in the play. Like for so long, they were still in the play, in the playoff picture. And They've only fallen out now. They're only, they're not even that far back. But I don't know if we've seen anything over the past, I mean, even going back a couple weeks, like beyond these two losses, most recent ones, that makes you think, yeah, this team has the mettle to pull together a run down the stretch of the season and capitalize on all these things that are working in their favor. So
Yeah, I agree. It's you look at it, and I compare it to, and this is immediately what I thought when I was putting together the AFC playoff picture this morning and just realizing the Pittsburgh Steelers were out of it. My first thought was, all right, I am the worst fantasy football player on the planet. That's why I don't do fantasy football content. You could ask anybody in my family. We have my two brothers and my dad are all in my fantasy football league. We've been in the same fantasy football league since I'm 10 years old. I've never won it. I think I've had a winning season twice. I make the playoffs every single year, just barely. And I always just scrape by. And I look at it this time of year, every year, and I go, dude, I've lost 4 games in a row. How am I still in the playoff picture? And you just realize everybody around you sucks too. They just suck a little bit better than you do. That's where the Pittsburgh Steelers are. Outside of Cincinnati, this team has, they've climbed their way to where they need to be. I'll give them that. Like, you can't knock the 7 wins and say, they shouldn't count, blah, blah, blah. No, they won 7 games. That's impressive as itself. Where you are right now is the wrong place to be. And that's the problem, is if you won 7 games at the end of the year, if you started out 0-6 and now you're 7-0, the highlight of this conversation is not, the Steelers might be in a lot of trouble. The highlight of this conversation is, how far can the Pittsburgh Steelers go? But instead, they're about to enter week 15 at the lowest point they've been, not even this year, but really in the last 3 years. I have never, this is season 5 for me covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have never once seen a team, and I've been around the Mason Rudolph getting benched for Duck Hodges getting benched for Mason Rudolph going down and Duck Hodges going back in. I've been through it all. Never in these 5 years have I seen a team as bad as the Pittsburgh Steelers have been the last 2 weeks, just all around. I'm not talking one position. I'm not talking quarterback. I'm just talking mentality-wise. This is the first time it kind of feels like the Pittsburgh Steelers season is over, and everybody kind of accepts that the Pittsburgh Steelers season is over. And now you look at it and you go, well, these are probably your 4 toughest games of the season right now. Cincinnati's still in the playoff hunt. Indianapolis, maybe I'm wrong here, but do you look at Indianapolis even as a winnable game? Because I view it as, this is a game the Pittsburgh Steelers should win. This is a game that Mike Tomlin typically wins. I don't chalk anything up to a typical Mike Tomlin anything anymore after what I saw last night. Do you even view Indy as a possibility? And if they lose, do you just give up? Is that the year?
To be quite honest with you, it feels like every game besides Baltimore is winnable. Because I think this team has proven that still the floor is, like, it's tough to separate their entire body of work from what we've seen the past 2 weeks, I think. Whether that's fair or not. Like, maybe these past 2 weeks have been who they are. Maybe that's just who we've got to deal with now. Or maybe their earlier, run through the season is who they actually are. I don't really know. But I think Indianapolis is winnable, but you got 2 teams headed in completely opposite directions, so I don't chalk it up as anything likely. I'm not banking on it at all. I'm not banking on any of these final 4 games being wins, because the Steelers just haven't earned the benefit of the doubt in any way. And going on with 3 out of 4 on the road, like and like I said, Indy has momentum, and Indy has won a few games, and despite, like, you talk about a team that has had some resilience, like Jonathan Taylor in and out. Their starting quarterback, looked like a star early on, and then as a rookie, and then he goes down. Like, that's a team that's handled adversity really well, and they're, I think, still playing with some confidence. And the Steelers are going to go in, they're going to tell us all week that they're angry and they're motivated and they're getting back to work and everything, but this just felt deflating. And so I don't know how a team that is this deflated and has the air taken out of their sails this repeatedly and in this big a ways can walk into a stadium like that and have any kind of confidence. So I don't really have any confidence in them either.
Let me lay out this situation for you. So there's, and I think we could both agree with this. There's a possibility, just knowing who the Pittsburgh Steelers are, being around these guys as long as we have, I don't think anybody sitting in this chat right now would sit here and say the Steelers aren't gonna. If I lay this out, this is impossible for the Steelers. But you could see Pittsburgh winning against Indy, against Cincinnati, against Seattle, and then heading to Baltimore. Baltimore has already got the top seed in the AFC locked in. They're shutting it all down. Who cares? They beat Baltimore. Or even if Baltimore is still there, they beat Baltimore. And they squeak their way into the postseason barely. And here they are. Everything's fine. If they win the games the way that they have been winning games, because there's no way. I mean, there's a line between this is who the Pittsburgh Steelers could be, and this is just a little, you're living in a fairy tale land. They could win the games. They are not going to win the games impressively. That's just not going to happen. If they barely squeak by, they win these 4 games. They win in Pittsburgh Steelers fashion. They look terrible for 3 quarters, and then they pull out a victory 4 times. If you're a fan, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, do you even want that to happen at this point? Are you sitting here going, oh, yeah, can't wait? And I'm not talking like the few, because there's obviously a chunk that are like, you want to win at all times. The large majority. Do you think they're sitting here at this point going, do you think that it's real, it's honest, when they say, I'd rather them just lose out and get a better draft pick?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that is certainly real for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think you've just, everyone wants to make the playoffs, everyone wants to win as much as possible, but when you've seen this movie a couple times,
Yep.
and when you've seen a team kind of just barely squeak by every time, like, I don't know, do you want to spend another week just watching a playoff blowout? Because they're going to play a good team even if they sneak into the playoffs. And
Exactly.
I don't know, just I understand it, Maybe I don't necessarily agree, but I understand it. I mean, that's after I opened this by,
talking about the Patriots.
Right, talking about the Patriots.
Yeah. Pick. Yeah.
But like, yeah, I understand it, quite honestly. I understand, like, not wanting to kind of put yourself through that, and like force yourself to watch a playoff game just because, you always got to give your team that hope and that chance to prove you wrong. But this team has almost never proven anyone wrong, or at least since, at least especially this year. Like, there very rarely have the Steelers kind of exceeded your expectations in a positive way. So I can understand why fans would look at a potential playoff matchup with Kansas City, or I don't even know who the other top seeds are.
Miami, Baltimore,
or Jacksonville might still
even
be
Jacksonville.
Up there.
Yeah,
right. I don't understand how a Steelers fan could look at that and think, yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be a good time to go to Kansas City or Miami for the opening round of the playoffs and just, like, in all likelihood, get your teeth kicked in. Like, that's not fun.
No, and that's where they sit. And I agree. I look at this situation, and if I'm sitting on the outside, if I'm a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm not, like, obviously you're rooting for your team to win. You want your team to win, but there's always that part of me that's thinking the ceiling on this thing is really low. Like, not kind of low, not it's really, really low. And it all season long, like, we've hit the point where it's week 14, about to be week 15. We know where the Pittsburgh Steelers ceiling is, and honestly, it's lower because Kenny Pickett isn't here anymore. And there goes any chance that Mitch Trubisky takes over this starting job long term, because that's just not going to happen. I mean, it's crazy. Maybe it's an overreaction, but I look at this Pittsburgh Steelers team and I say, you see how far they can go, and it's not far enough. And fans are at a point where they'd rather Mike Tomlin streak, and I shouldn't be speaking for the fans, so I'll take that back. Fans do not think this way. This is how I think. I think that if I was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, my thought process, there would be part of me, because obviously you want your team to win, like I said, but there would be part of me that sits here and says, I'd rather Mike Tomlin's streak end so that we could stop talking about how good he is as a coach, because he just pulls off winning records and doesn't win playoff games. And that removes all excuses. At that point, you're a losing head coach. You're coming off of a losing season. Your team gave up on you. I'd rather have that as somewhat of negotiating grounds to get better than to just feel comfortable, which is what the Pittsburgh Steelers have been for the last 5 years. And I think there's a large chunk of the fan base that would agree with me. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your crazy neighbor, like shouting up to the stars and yelling, "Help!" We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong. So instead of drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all-natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. That's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. It fills the void in a natural, guilt-free way. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing while breaking your habit. I got this thing, and the first thing I noticed was how sharp it looks. This is probably the sharpest looking device I own. And then immediately I start fidgeting with it and realize how awesome that aspect of it is. And then when it comes to the taste, I mean, you can't beat the cool, crisp mint flavor. It's easily my favorite, and I haven't put this thing down since I discovered it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup with destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/allsteelerstalk or scan the QR code and use code allsteelerstalk to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. The Fume Solano launched last November, and you can upgrade your Journey Pack to the Solano to enjoy the premium walnut barrel and onyx black coated mouthpiece that has a smoother finish and still get 10% off. That's tryfum.com and use our code AllSteelersTalk to save an additional 10% off your order today. Let's talk about Mike Tomlin. Minkah Fitzpatrick said this after the game, which is huge. He was talking to ESPN's Brooke Pryor. He said, quote, "I think too many people don't want to tool for it. They just want to walk out here and think that they're going to make plays and think that they're going to perform at a high level. I think we need to have more people who want to work for it, not expect it to be handed to them. This is the NFL. Nothing's handed to you. You got to earn everything. I think that dudes just think that because they're wearing the black and gold, that they're going to win games. And I think we need to check that mentality and make people realize that they got to earn that mentality." That's what he says after the game. Clear as day. People are pissed off. Cam Hayward says that if people aren't executing, himself included, and both these guys are very media savvy, there needs to be changes made because they need guys out there that are looking to win and looking to execute. I think that all ties into one big thing here, and it's the same thing we've been talking about for weeks now. The Pittsburgh Steelers just don't seem to be a team that is prepared, that is locked in, and that is motivated to get better and overcome the hump and win. Lose to Arizona, lose to New England. You look at this, you look at Minkah's comments. What are your thoughts on those? Is it time to start talking about, is Mike Tomlin the problem?
Yeah, I'm willing to take pretty seriously the guy who is playing with a broken hand, quite honestly, with you.
I agree.
Like, we were standing there listening to him. He's got a cast over his hand, and he just played what I thought was a pretty good game overall. Yeah. And I take that guy seriously. That seems like a guy who's invested. And you know, that's before even knowing, you know, even thinking about who Minkah is and what we already knew about him. Look, like, I think we're going to have this conversation about Mike Tomlin. We're going to say a lot of things that are pretty negative about him. I still think in my heart of hearts that he's like a decent coach. That, yeah, you know, if he left the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, he'd walk to Los Angeles to coach the Chargers and they'd be in the AFC Championship game. But, man, this is stale. Like, yep, this is stale. This is the same stuff over and over again. It is, you know, and it's through a bunch of changes too. It's you know, ever since Ben went down, I mean, even before that, it's been defense leading the team. It's been, a lot of penalties and undisciplined things holding the Steelers back on offense. It's and you look at the kind of, you take a smaller, more narrow view. You look at the past 2 years, and it is the same movie over and over again, except it's getting a lot worse. It's getting uglier. It's getting, the things that are repeatable mistakes, the things that we see over and over again, are just becoming more and more glaring. You wrote about it today, but it's just like the unprepared stuff. That I think we can both kind of agree that this is not a perfect roster, but there is more talent than what they are. They're not playing up to their level of talent, and that's an indictment. That's always an indictment on coaching. That's the only thing you can come back to, is that this is a decently talented roster, and they are underperforming in every way under the leadership of a guy that we are told that we expect to kind of make the most of things, to make the most of imperfect rosters, and that's not what he's doing right now. And at that point, I think it's fair to have that conversation, especially after these 2 losses in particular. It's something you guys start talking about, is whether Mike Tomlin is part of the problem, or because he certainly isn't being part of the solution right now.
I agree. I think it does. This conversation, I agree wholeheartedly, has to start with the fact that I also believe Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Fame coach, that he's one of the best coaches in the NFL, that if he goes somewhere else in the right situation, that team is one of the best in the league. And maybe all it takes is for Art Rooney and Omar Khan to take power away from him and say, you no longer get to hire coaches, and you no longer get to control any part of this team. This is not your doing anymore. We will hire offensive coordinators. We will hire defensive coordinators. We will hire position coaches. You no longer get to touch any of it. And maybe that's what he needs, because I look at Mike Tomlin and I look at the problem right now, and I think it's clear as day. Mike Tomlin is a guy that you will run through a brick wall for. And I think everybody who's ever watched a Pittsburgh Steelers game, or watched a Pittsburgh Steelers speech, or just listen to Mike Tomlin talk for 10 seconds understands that everybody in that locker room would run through a brick wall for that guy. 0 questions asked. He is the ultimate motivator. That is what he specializes in. That is how he's become such a great coach. And maybe, just maybe, the NFL caught up with him, but maybe, just maybe, the Pittsburgh Steelers roster is not built for him. And that could be the problem, is that Mike Tomlin is a motivator, but he is not a genius when it comes to schematically creating a team or building a game plan that will defeat everybody. He's not Mike McDaniels. He's not Sean McVay. He's not Kyle Shanahan. He's Mike Tomlin. He's a totally different style of coach. And it just feels like when Minka talking about this and Deontay talking about last week, how they overlooked the Cardinals and all this stuff, like all the issues that have happened with the Pittsburgh Steelers this season and last season, it just feels like he doesn't have control of the locker room, just because his guys aren't being motivated the way that they typically would. If it was a bunch of TJ Watts and Cam Haywards and Minka Fitzpatricks and, probably Kenny Pickett's, I'm sure that the Pittsburgh Steelers would be phenomenal. And at one point, that's who Mike Tomlin's team was. But today, you're dealing with George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, who clearly these guys are just looking for touchdowns and receptions. And that's part of the NFL today. That's what these guys are interested in. But you got a bunch of these guys. And if you cannot come up with a game plan to utilize their talents, you're not doing anything by trying to motivate them. It's just not working. And if that's who the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to be, if they're just trying to be a team loaded with talent who isn't looking, we heard all offseason. Omar Khan's talked to us a dozen times, and every single time he's talked to us, and you ask him, why did you acquire this guy? Why did you acquire this guy? The answer is always the same. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's got a Pittsburgh Steeler mentality. We're looking for a Pittsburgh Steelers type player. I don't think they were. I genuinely don't know what they were looking for, but that is by far a Pittsburgh Steelers type player, because they're damn good at football, but they're not motivated in the way that Mike Tomlin directs his team and wins and utilizes his coaching style. And again, I think you put him on in a team, in an organization where all those guys are just that. They're just, you fire me up, I'm going to go win some football games. Mike Tomlin's a Super Bowl winning coach again. But in Pittsburgh, that's not this team. And it's clear as day. We've we've used the word diva and, issues and selfish like a billion times this season. And that's who the Pittsburgh Steelers have. And you could win with those guys. Mike Tomlin cannot win with those guys. And I think at this point, that is enough to acknowledge that he's just, I don't want to say he's the problem. I want to say that he is right now not the right coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest point is that it's not doesn't say anything about Mike Tomlin necessarily to say that this has just kind of run its course. I think you can acknowledge that he did a lot of great things here. He's been a good coach for this team in the past, but the results are the results. You are only as good as your last performance, and his last performance, the performance before that, most of the performances over the past 2 years have just not been good enough. And I think it's okay to say that this has maybe run its course, that it's stale, that it's just not working anymore. This kind of stuff happens to great coaches all the time. And, I brought up the fact that he could move on and go coach another team to a Super Bowl. And like, you've seen that happen before. And like, you've seen both sides, kind of divorce from a long-time coaching situation with someone who's generally agreed upon to be a good coach, and both sides come out better for it. Like it happened in Philly with like Andy Reid and them. Like Don Shula got canned, didn't he? Like all-time leader in wins. Like it might happen to Bill Belichick this year. Like it happens, and it doesn't. It just you can choose how you approach it. Like you can let it go out and die in flames and just wait for the whole thing to burn down, or you can kind of get ahead of it and you can say, look, we just need something different right now. Doesn't say anything about you, but and we're going to let you kind of go out with grace, but you're just not, like you said, you're not right for right now. And that's not an indictment of anyone's coaching abilities. It's just an indictment of the situation.
Do you think that I asked this a week ago, you said no, and I have a feeling that your answer is the same, but do you think there's any possibility that the Steelers front office is sitting around having some of the same thoughts that we are? Not saying that it's time to go, but starting to have some of those same thoughts.
Oh, definitely. I don't think you can. Even the most adamant of, like, it's actually funny. Like, I rode down to Morgantown for the backyard brawl with Chris Carter and Noah Hiles, and half of our drive down was about, I made a joke about like, oh man, like what if the Patriots win tomorrow night? Like that's going to be pretty tough for the Steelers. That's like, how crazy would that be? But it just launched, like we all had a conversation about like, okay, what would it take for Mike Tomlin to go, for you to be done with? And Chris Carter very adamantly was like, no, Mike Tomlin can turn this around. Like he's the guy for it. And then he texted me, after I think the second Bailey Zappi touchdown, and he was like, okay, if they get blown out by the Patriots, then maybe we can start that. Like,
maybe it's time to go.
Yeah, that was the turn I saw last night, was that, there were even the most ardent of Mike Tomlin defenders started to turn. They started to think, okay, maybe, like, they started to kind of, I think, get to that point that everyone else had been at, which is that this is just not working, and that this is just not right for right now, which I think is notable, because I don't think anyone, no matter how much you love Mike Tomlin, can look at that game and think that he doesn't share. He doesn't have to take the vast majority of the blame for how that game unfolded.
I agree. I think for the first time, like you asked me a week ago, and I explained like the 3-year theory, and I've been informed that it's actually 2 years. I think that bumps up. I don't think the Steelers would ever, straight up fire somebody. I think it would be a mutual agreement that things have run their course and that Mike Tomlin's time in Pittsburgh is over. But I agree. Last night you watched a lot of people who are Mike Tomlin defenders turn into, at bare minimum, I just don't know anymore. Like, I don't know what to expect. And it has to be made very clear. The Pittsburgh Steelers, if they switch coaches, there's it's probably 60-40 that next coach sucks and that things just burn to the ground and become way worse than they are. And if that's a risk that you're willing to take, you got to make the move, and it works in the better a lot of the time. But you also have to have the understanding that there is a very significant chance that the next coach is terrible. And I think that's what it comes down to for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think any of it anymore is, oh, Mike Tomlin's the best coach that we could possibly have. He's the greatest coach of all time. I think that's honestly out the door. I think that they Just like you said, they have to start. People are starting to realize maybe things have run their course. I think the only thing that would hold them back is them sitting around going, well, do we want to waste the next 3 years looking for a head coach, or do we just, figure this out? Because I don't know what the stats are, but I would imagine if it's not zero, it might be 1 or 2 head coaches have come in and won a Super Bowl in their first year as a head coach of a football team. It's just not like you're going to go through your struggles. You're going to go through an entire change. That is the biggest change you can make. I don't know if the Steelers are interested in that. If they are, well, I think that they are having those thoughts that maybe it is time to make the change. With that said, let's move on to another change that the Pittsburgh Steelers might have to make moving into Week 15 against the Colts. Mitch Trubisky last night finishes the game with just a simple 1 touchdown, 1 interception, had a 74.7 passer rating, and threw for 190 yards. But if you watched the game, if you sat through that and toughed it out, congratulations. Probably should have thrown 3. Is 3 the right number? 3 interceptions. Had one called back for pass interference. Had another that was clear as day, should have been an interception. Guy was just, I don't know what happened on the field. Had another one late in the game that, he had 3 or 4, but the one at the end of the game where he throws it up to Pat Freiermuth as he's trying to escape the pocket. There's 3 guys around Pat and it just goes over their head. Probably should have been 4. So maybe Mitch should have 3, 4 interceptions. Timing was terrible. There were a lot of bad things after the game. He just everything was his fault. He just said it was the first time all season that I think somebody sat at a podium or did an interview and with the Pittsburgh Steelers and sat there and said, "This is all on me." It was the first time I thought anybody had accountability. Mitch sat there and was just like, you could have been like, "Mitch, dude, why is it so cold outside?" And he'd be like, It's I should have played better. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry that you have to wear a jacket. It's on me. The big question moving forward, is it Mason Rudolph time? Is it time to sit Mitch down and end the Trubisky experiment for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, I disagree a little bit with your. I don't think Mitch was as bad, I think, last night as you kind of laid out. But okay. I understand. I think he's certainly not anything special. He wasn't a game changer. He wasn't even a game manager, I felt like. And he was kind of backed into a corner as well. Going down 21-0 or 21-3, whatever, right away.
Yeah.
I still think he's kind of. If you're interested in winning these last 4 games, I don't really think Mason Rudolph does anything different for you. I don't think he's going to help you. I don't think he's going to make you any better in that sense. I don't think he's going to give you anything different from the quarterback spot. And I kind of don't really. Yeah, no, I don't like what in Mason Rudolph's past makes you think that this guy's capable of leading this team that is so clearly flawed and broken. Maybe I shouldn't call them broken at this point, but they look broken right now. Mason Rudolph is supposed to be the squeaky wheel that need the grease. That's all we needed to do to turn this around.
That. I don't think that Mason Rudolph wins games. I just think that Mitch.
So what's
Mitch
the point
is going to lose you games. I think Mitch contributed significantly in the loss last night.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was a complete team collapse. He bears a bunch of responsibility for that. But I think the only reason you would sub him out and put Mason Rudolph in is if you think Mason Rudolph can win you games, can give you anything better. And I don't believe that really at all. I don't think there's anything in Mason Rudolph's past that makes you think that he is a better option for this team at this point. And I think you're still trying to win. I don't know. To me, putting in Mason would be like waving a white flag. And I don't think that's the right message to send at all. No matter, understanding all that stuff that we just spent, a half hour talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think you can wave the white flag like that, which is what it would feel like to me.
All right. I disagree, but I
let it on me. Why do you?
I see where you're coming from. So my thought is Mitch loses you games, and I don't think Mason wins you games, but I don't think Mason loses you games. And I think honestly, I just think that we don't know what to expect from Mason Rudolph at this point. It's been 2 years since he's touched the field, really 3 years since he's touched the field for a significant game. He played a week 18 against the Browns that didn't even count because the Steelers were already locked into the playoffs. I mean, I don't know what you're getting out of Mason Rudolph. I don't think. I mean, I've personally like avoided this guy in the locker room for like 2 years because I was like, dude, I'm talking so much smack on you. I know you got to be hearing it. So I've been the biggest Mason Rudolph critic probably ever. I think that Mitch, it's honestly less to do with Mason and more to do with if the option was Trace McSorley or Mitch Trubisky, I still think I'm saying you got to give Trace a shot and just see what you got. I just think Mitch is that bad. Like, I like Mitch. I think he's a good dude. I think he bears a lot of responsibility. I think he knows how to be a leader. I just look at Mitch and say he has no clue what's going on out there. He missed. I mean, if you go back and watch the tape, he misses on honestly on almost every single drive. He misses multiple wide open receivers, including one to Calvin Austin. I don't remember the other one. Oh, one to George Pickens up the seam right at the beginning. That probably would have resulted in touchdowns. Like he looked so rattled out there. He looked like the game was moving so fast. And again, maybe, I mean, that's how Kenny's looked too all season long. So maybe it's just the coaching staff. Maybe it's just the team not being able to prepare these guys. Or, maybe it's Mike Sullivan, who maybe it's the quarterback coach. Who knows? I think what we've seen from Mitch the last 2 performances out of him stepping into a game this season, he's such a risk out there. And I don't know if Mason is less of a risk, but I'd like to believe that at bare minimum, check down Mason can just get you where you need to be. And and that's the thing, like if Mitch doesn't throw an interception last night, last night's tough, and the game before that's tough too, because the defense was equally as bad as the offense. But if you look at another game this season, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense does enough where all you got to do is not lose the game. And I don't know if Mason's going to win you a game, but I got a hard time believing that Mason's going to go out there and throw 4 interceptions. And it's been a long time since Mitch has not thrown an interception. Like, did you going into the game, did you really have any expectation that Mitch wasn't going to throw an interception? I thought that was the easiest bet you could have made, was that Mitch was going to throw a pick. I thought he would have matched it with a touchdown, but I thought like the guy just loves to throw bad passes. Like,
yeah, to be honest, I didn't think about it that much, but I mean, I guess if I had, I probably would have thought that he was going to throw an interception. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I still, I don't know. I think for all those same reasons, I think about it this way. We talked a lot about like Mason Rudolph trade scenarios, last year. I mean, or maybe around the trade deadline this year. When you talk about like, I don't think Mason's going to lose you games. Like, was there no other team in the end? Like, it's not like anyone has been starving for. It's not like
the quarterback
I don't think
situation.
No. It's not like the quarterback situation has been a picture of health in the NFL this year. I think a lot of other NFL teams were looking for the exact same thing: someone who wouldn't lose you games. Mason Rudolph clearly wasn't one of those guys who they thought wasn't going to lose them games. And so, like, I just think if 31 other NFL teams didn't want him, why should the Steelers? Like, this is, which is a little harsh, but like that's.
Can you make the same argument with Mitch? Nobody called about Mitch.
Well,
not that we know.
Well,
of,
yeah, but that's
of.
like, I think that's a different situation though. Like, having to pay Mason or Mitch's salary on a rental versus like for a backup versus. Mason's, who, I mean, if they don't give you anything different between the two of them, then
no, I agree.
You're going to take Mason. You're going to take the cheaper option. But like, I don't know, Mitch. I think at least like gives you a chance to have. I think Mitch, for the same reason that he's a little reckless, like that's. I think that also like, I think this team like honestly needs that a little bit. Like needs a little bit of a spark. Needs someone who's like not unwilling to make play, like especially at this point in the season. Like if this was if we were talking about this, after the Jacksonville loss or something like that, I think I'd be singing a different tune, because then you're still like in real solid playoff position. I don't kind of see the Steelers as being in like real solid playoff position right now anymore. And I think you could live with a more conservative option. But I don't think playing conservative does you any good at this point in the year. Like I don't think.
I see where you're coming from. I do see where you're coming from. I still stand on I think Mitch is going to lose you games, and you can't take that risk. I have a hard time with this, just because I think at the end of the day, the next 4 games are going to blow up so bad in the Steelers' face that it's going to be rough either way. Like I just don't. Yeah. I don't see I look at it like people were tweeting, and I tweeted. I said, like the video of George Pickens just like slumped over in the end zone. Like, I can't believe this is happening. I feel for him, and that doesn't get better with Mason Rudolph. Like Mason Rudolph doesn't come in here and all of a sudden George Pickens, everybody's happy. I think either way, things are getting worse by the day. I agree with you when you say that Mitch provides more of an opportunity for spark. I think that that's very true. I think he provides more of an opportunity for spark than Kenny Pickett does. I think balancing that risk reward is very tough, very difficult. My problem is if you roll with Mitch, which the Steelers are probably going to roll with Mitch, you risk the Mason Rudolph has to step into a game because Mitch is so bad after not playing for 2.5 years. And that's a tough spot to be in. That is a very tough spot to be in when your back is against the wall. So I just, maybe I'm not saying start Mason, even though I think I am saying start Mason. I think at bare minimum, both of these guys are getting first team reps for the next week because I just don't think you could go into the next game with the sole mindset that Mitch is going to be fine and everything's going to be okay with Mitch Trubisky. I think that is playing a dangerous game if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that makes perfect sense. But also, I mean, look, it's a tough situation anytime you have to put your third string quarterback in.
Yeah, obviously.
So, I mean, like if we're judging what's a tough situation versus not, this entire season has been a tough situation. So,
yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
It feels like splitting hairs, and quite honestly, like we're gonna hang up on this call and be like, why did we spend so much time arguing about this thing that is like not gonna materially change?
That will not happen. Yeah,
right. But I mean, I get it. Like you've got to find who gives you the best chance to win. I'm just not sure that's Mason. I know Mitch doesn't give you. It's a low floor it's a low bar to kind of clear.
Yeah, dude,
but I just
tough. Is it Trace McSorley? Should it be Trace McSorley? Not a chance.
I don't think so, but I mean, who knows at this point? Like, who knows? Because who knows where the coaching staff's head is at? Like, who knows where they kind of fall in the effort versus like, oh, we got to keep this like stable, we got to keep this together versus like, who cares? Like, we just lost to 2-10 teams. Like, let's just let it rip.
Right. Yep. But I think that's what you get with Mitch. So we'll see what happens. That being said, we're gonna head into a long weekend here. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, check out our work at allsteelers.com and our pick coverage at InsideThePanthers.com. Wish we had a Victory Friday for you, but we don't. We'll be back on Monday to, talk again about maybe how dreadful the Pittsburgh Steelers are, but maybe how the weekend turned out in favor for these guys. Appreciate you. Enjoy a lovely weekend in the Burgh. Peace.